You're watching Esports Center, and today we're covering worlds colliding between esports and traditional sports. Joining me today, Norris Howard, head of Collegiate Esports Content for Beasley Esports. Hi, Norris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. I honestly, I can't complain. So what I'm getting really excited about, though, that I'm dying to talk to you about is the esports movement happening. Because as I mentioned in your title, a lengthy one it is, but in that beautiful title, you are the head of Collegiate Esports Content. So you
hmm
must be covering content across universities across the nation. How far does that
Yes.
scope go, and what trends are you noticing regarding an esports movement really taking over the college space?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think the number one thing is that it covers the gamut of all sorts of institutions across North America, and we've covered content in schools even in Canada. I think the biggest trend that we're starting to see is that you have an investment across all colleges and across colleges of all sizes, but where you're seeing the most successful programs are in medium to smaller size schools. You're not seeing your University of Michigan's or Ohio State's or Southern California. You're not seeing those schools really come to the fore, even though they have the most resources in a athletic department or an engineering department. You're seeing the smaller schools really be the ones that are winning a lot of competitions, mostly because that's where the emphasis is going. And kids are starting to get scholarships now for esports. And I think it's going to become in the next 4 to 5 years a really strong avenue for a lot of smaller institutions to get their name out there and attract a lot of talent, both academically and both with the esports side of things. So I think the larger universities, once traditional sports come back, will lean more into that. But I think there's a lot of talented kids they're going to miss out on simply because they see traditional sports still as their bread and butter. So the smaller schools are really leading the charge with esports.
I've noticed that too, and it's great to hear someone who's talking to way more universities than I probably am. Well, I'll just go ahead and go out on a limb and say you are. But why do you think that is? You think that larger universities feel that esports would kind of overshadow or hinder their ability to recruit for their traditional sports? And is that really smart right now? Because there's a lot of sports on hold and we don't know for how long.
Well, I think the main thing that's happening right now, at least to a board of regents or to a school president, is the argument of profitability, right? I think esports is still so nascent and new that people are still really trying to figure out a lot of the business model behind esports, whether traditional sports has had a 100-year head start on esports. But I think eventually what they will see is the avenues to monetize are a lot more innovative and a lot more sort of authentic and genuine than a lot of times with traditional sports, i.e. microtransactions. I think if you can have a school that maybe brokers some sort of deal with a developer to say, our school is designing skins for this particular game, or you can go into the game and get, a Clemson skin or, a University of Florida skin. And it costs you X amount of dollars that will go to the university. I think you'll begin to see stuff like that. And that is appealing across pretty much all gamers. Most people will tell you how much they hate microtransactions, but at the same time, so many people actually buy things in video games. So I think that's the biggest thing as to why the big universities haven't necessarily taken the plunge. But as you said, there's no sports right now. So what's the alternative? I think the bigger universities need to bite the bullet on it and fund their esports programs properly, make them varsity programs. And I think they'll see a big swell of energy going into their school, because that's who's pushing entertainment right now is video games and esports. Like, so much other stuff simply has not happened post COVID, and we really don't even know when this stuff is going to be coming back. So I think it behooves them to look at it as an alternative.
Yeah, it's a perfect opportunity. It's a prime opportunity to kind of usher something else in, introduce it to the student body, recruit new students. To your point about the recruitment opportunities, I really want to touch on that because you mentioned the possibilities to expand the benefits of esports well beyond what we've typically gotten out of traditional sports. Traditional sports, we get the fan base, we get the
Yep.
community, we get to go rally on a football field, in the environment, in the stadium, get to
Yeah.
be with our friends, right? And honestly, anytime I went to a football game, I mean, I'm from Texas, Friday Night Lights, definitely a thing. It was for the nachos. I'm not gonna lie. I really
Yeah.
like the nachos. Okay. You don't get that kind of cheese just anywhere.
Yeah.
Only at a concession stand. But esports, though, there's so much applied learning opportunities. You talked about STEM and even athletic, but the broadcasting, media, marketing, social strategy, learning opportunities, the business management side of the house, all of these kids impress me so much because they're so hands-on in the organization and structure of their program.
Well, and I'm happy you brought that up because I mentioned Clemson because I talked to a kid from Clemson we had on the show one day for Checkpoint XP on campus. It's our flagship college program that we do for Beasley Esports. But I talked to this kid and he's a law and marketing student. I believe he's in postgrad, so he's in a master's program. But here's a kid who they don't have a varsity program. They're still a club sport, but he took all of his applied learning from his major and put it towards this esports program. And he's trying to begin to broker partnerships for the esports division or for the esports club before they're even a varsity program. So they can go to the university and say, look at all the established relationships we already have. Look at the avenues for sponsorship and monetization that we're bringing to you. So the only thing you have to do is give us your blessing and allow us to throw the official logo on ourselves. I think that is part of what you're saying in terms of the interdisciplinary nature of esports. When we talk about traditional sports, the vast majority of athletes have one goal, and that's to become pro. Every esports kid that they know that they're doing most of this for fun, and they're probably going to go into some other discipline afterwards. But looking at the STEM field, looking at the things that you learn from esports, when you're recruiting, you're probably going to get those kids that are going to go into those more STEM-based fields through esports as opposed to traditional sports. And I'm not necessarily knocking, traditional athletes because there are plenty of them that go for postgraduate degrees. There's plenty of them that go for STEM-based degrees. So I don't want to say that there is none of that in traditional sports, but I think because the pathway is so much clearer for traditional sports that when we talk about esports, there's a much more willingness to talk about what your plans are for graduation, post-graduation, and your career.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really applying it to the learning that is going on in the classroom and how they can apply that into the matches. So it's literally extending beyond the matches into the classroom. But they're able to exercise that in the program. There's some kids that are on the teams that don't actually play. They just shoutcast. And if you don't know what that is, right? It's like sports casting. They're shoutcasting the matches that are happening live. They're going through the play-by-plays. I mean, that's phenomenal experience that they get to do that for multiple tournaments, multiple events throughout the year. And it's hard work, but it's allowing them to put into practice what they're learning, make it real.
Yeah.
And some of those kids are actually supporting the technology that goes behind esports. And
Absolutely.
that can be applied to any career path afterwards. But with esports growing into a much more professional organizing body and ecosystem, where we're seeing high school leagues now, we have middle school league now, we have collegiate leagues now, and more universities, like you said, are adding esports programs to their options for the students. What about the professional side of the house? Are we going to see more of that merging, those worlds colliding, where traditional sports athletes like Amon Green, who's a professional player in the Level Up Virtual Arcade tonight, are we going to see more players like him joining the esports phenomenon?
I think definitely first and foremost, from the investment side, absolutely. You're definitely going to see more of that. I think mostly because esports is one of those things that is not necessarily beholden to the physical space, right? As we see Overwatch League continued on, League of Legends and all their branches continued on professionally. We see all of collegiate esports restarting online. this semester. So it's not beholden to that. And so the ability to invest in something that even when a physical space cannot be used, you can still do it, I think is just a good investment. From the sort of coaching and professional side, I think what you're going to start seeing is a lot of people who play the esport version of the professional sport. So in the Madden and 2K and FIFA space, you will begin to see, I think, a lot of athletes go into the coaching roles, maybe the advisory roles of a lot of those esports. I think the
Or maybe
difference
play
in
themselves.
maybe I think, I think when it comes to stuff like that, it becomes a little more difficult because in the same way, I'm 33 years old. There is no training my body to be ready for the NFL at this point. Like it's too
I
late.
mean,
It's over.
dream big, Norris, but
It's too. I'm listen. All 5'9" of me is not happening. But I think in the esports space, that's a thing that a lot of people kind of take for granted, is that they assume that, oh, it's just playing video games. No, there are kids who have been playing League of Legends since they were 7 years old at this point, that are now 17, that have mechanical skill that are far beyond what anybody could do just picking it up and playing for a few months.
but it might not be
It's
the
like
same.
chess.
You know what? Yes, it is like chess. I will give you that. And that's why these kids are smart and an awesome recruitment opportunity for schools. So I'll just hit that plug.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to the pro athletes switching over to esports and those worlds kind of colliding, I actually don't think that it would be necessarily them picking it up for the first time. I've noticed that almost all athletes play video
Mm-hmm.
games when they go home. They're also big fans. Like in the case of Amon Green, um, he is the head coach or head of esports there at Lakeland, but he coaches Rocket League.
Yeah.
I read in an article recently that he's really good at Rocket League. He plays Rocket League, but his favorite game to watch is Madden. No surprise. And I
Yeah.
wonder if that's what we're going to see, where spectating, as far as expanding beyond the gaming community and really building the fan base, enhancing or amplifying that esports movement that we're seeing, I think will happen when there's more spectators, people that aren't gamers that want to watch. And maybe it's just going to be an easier transition if we're watching traditional e-games.
Well, I'll tell you this: if you want a good indicator as to expanding viewership and understanding what sort of a spectator experience could be like for esports, the World Championships of League of Legends is coming up in a couple weeks from now, going through the beginning of October. Once you get to that grand final game, I mean, for esports fans, that is the Super Bowl. And when I say by it's the Super Bowl, I'm talking about high production values, millions of dollars going into this event. They've had, halftime, well, not necessarily halftime performances, but they have opening performances that have holograms and, artists performing next to digital versions of themselves where they've taken characters from the game and projected them next to the performers and they did the song together. It's something that more people watch than the World Series. Like, let that sink in. More people watch that than the World Series. Like, that's something that I think, from our little sort of North American bubble, seem to, not necessarily have the context for. But if you want to know just how big this esports thing is and just how wonderful and engaging and awesome the spectator experience can be, I think that's a great event to look towards. Same thing for Overwatch Grand Finals. And I think pro athletes see that and they understand that parallel. They know what the crowds are like. They know what that feeling when you step on the field, hearing that noise, what it does to you psychologically as you prepare to play. And I think they see a lot of parallels of that in esports. And that's why I think you're starting to see a lot of them gravitate towards the space.
No, those are great points. Speaking of parallels, you could think about the games, right? All the games that they played, like SUNY Canton, for example, they were on one of our esports center shows here for Connect, and they have 8 different teams, 8 different
Mhm.
games that they have on their in their program. So you can think about games in parallel to the different types of sports. let's pick two random games. We got Overwatch in the arcade matches tonight, and we have Valorant. So that could be a parallel to football and baseball, right?
Absolutely.
So you don't have to try to cover. It's not just like one big umbrella. Treat each game that you add to your program as you grow as a different sport. So
Totally.
it falls under the esports umbrella, but different tactics, different strategy, different interest. You might have students there that know how to play a certain game. Like the kids will tell you what they want to play, and you just
Mm-hmm.
roll with the interest that you have. And it's a lot easier to drop a game and add a new game in a 2 seasons later than it is to just like pick up lacrosse when you have no lacrosse team at all.
Absolutely. And what we're beginning to see is that, for the varsity programs, they're having it fall under the athletic department, which makes sense. But the athletic department heads don't know anything about esports. So they're bringing in almost this sort of parallel sort of esports department head. They're calling them coaches, but they're not really coaches. They're department heads.
Yeah.
And they're bringing them in, and they are the ones organizing the sort of esports ecosystem within these colleges. And I think that is sort of the approach that, universities and people looking to invest in esports are going to have to do, because you can't, in the same way that you can't take a football head coach and expect them to go and coach, baseball or go coach hockey. You got to have specialists in the field. And so I think the more that we see esports expand, the more that we will begin to see those specialists emerge. And that's another one of those avenues that you were talking about, Erica, talking about how many different disciplines are involved within esports, because not only coaching, now you got to talk about support staff. Now you got to talk about social media, because the way you do social media for Overwatch is different how you do it for League of Legends, and da 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 da. So there's a lot.
Don't scare them. Don't scare them. This is attainable. Okay, we can do this. But
It's absolutely doable. Yes, and I don't want to scare you. It's absolutely doable. But I just think the biggest thing moving forward is that understanding that those people are there, though. You don't have to pull them out of thin air. You don't have to, fit a square peg into a round hole. There are people there on the collegiate and pro level that are ready to help you understand the esports space.
Yes, and because everybody that's involved, the gamers, the coaches, the whatever, everything in between, they're so enthusiastic and passionate about what they do that they're all working together. It's like a really nice wild, wild west, if I could put it that way.
Yes.
But I will say that I noticed there's two different ways to do it, right? So SUNY Canton, for example, I'll use them as an example, as my prime example here. They have 8 teams. The head of esports only coaches Overwatch, just like the head of esports at Lakeland, Almond Green, only coaches Rocket League. But what do they do with the other games? So depending on the players that you're recruiting, even if they're not great, there's always a designated team captain, and
Absolutely.
that team captain can act as the coach with an external resource to help that person out. But also think about the skills that the kids are developing at taking on those leadership roles. So SUNY Canton does that because they have amazing students, or amazing players rather. They have top 500 and top 1% in some of their games of players around the world are at SUNY Canton. So yeah, of course those guys can coach the game. They're really good. But what happens when you don't have that level of athlete, digital esports athlete? I was really intrigued by, have you heard of North America Scholastic Esports Federation? They're a nonprofit organization, and they offer these types of resources to schools for free.
Yeah, NASEF's great.
Come on.
Yeah, NASEF's great. And there's a ton of different organizations that provide a ton of resources, not necessarily even just on the support side, but I know NASEF and others, they even provide, hey, there's coaches looking for gigs. There's, people here, people there. They're able to sort of be arbiters of the greater esports ecosystem and help connect people. And I think that's absolutely awesome. And another example of where I think that's working well is in a place like University of California, Irvine, where they've taken a student specifically to be a player support coordinator. So specifically, that person is there to sort of make sure that not just the players, but also the coaches, everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. If somebody needs additional resources, if somebody's struggling with their studies, if somebody's doing this, there's a bunch of ways that they're able to help. And to your point, I think it's better in esports in particular when it's students helping students, because they're getting the on-the-job training, they're getting the skills that they're going to use moving into the professional world. And really not too many other industries work that way.
Yeah, you're right. We're really molding and shaping. It's selfish if you think about it, because we're molding and shaping beautiful people that will be able to communicate and contribute to society. It's wonderful.
Yes.
I absolutely
Yes.
love it. Yeah. So the last question I have for you on this topic of worlds colliding, I know we touched on it a little bit, but I want to double dip because it's super important. You talked about the broadcasting of esports, the spectatorship, but you talked about it on the scale of a large arena to give an example of, just how grand that could grow to. But if you're a university, small university, large university, and you're in a crawl, walk, run, you're just growing your
Mm-hmm.
esports program. Right now, the community is probably just inclusive to the gaming community. But to expand that inclusivity and the spectator, opportunities for the students to get excited about their teams, their esports teams, and like have pride and watch them, and have areas where they can actually, like, not necessarily a full arena, but digital displays for students to be able to watch, or if they're virtual streaming, watching from home, having a small group of friends come over just to watch the matches. That's what
Yep.
we like to do in spectating. It brings people together. How will collegiate environments start to allow spectating or enable it?
No, they absolutely should. And, I think of places like Boise State that have a full blown esports arena that they've created bespoke, where people can come in and watch the matches, obviously with some social distancing as we still in COVID and whatnot. But once this whole situation is over, I expect to see that esports arena packed to the gills. But it's not a big place. It's not a big, 30,000 seat arena. It's, I think the capacity there is something like 150 or something like
Yeah,
that,
it doesn't have to be
including,
great.
that's including staff and the people that are playing. But I think it is important to create spaces where people know this is where esports and gaming is happening on campus. Organically, they used to happen around college campuses and high schools everywhere, whether it be at a student union or a student center or quad, or maybe there was a dorm or a lounge somewhere that everybody sort of congregated and got together and played Smash Brothers or played Street Fighter or played Madden or whatever. These places popped up organically. I always say that, fighting games and college campuses are the foundations for all esports. Without those two things, you don't have esports. And so to create those spaces and make sure that they're well maintained, well funded and staffed, I don't think is a big ask for most universities, even small ones. So I think if you create those spaces where people know that this is where it happens, and you get some really, really enthusiastic student ambassadors for your program, I think you'll be able to see it grow, because without that enthusiasm, as you said, it'll just languish and sit there, and you'll get your same 14 kids a semester to come in and play and be a part of the team. But if you
Yeah.
go out there and recruit specifically for folks who can be torchbearers for your esports program, I think you'll see tremendous growth, and I think you'll see a lot of people gravitate towards your university or your establishment as a go-to place for gaming.
I couldn't have said it better. It's like you took all the words out of my mouth. Perfect guest. But I will say, to your point, last point there, not just recruiting and having it awesome for one semester, but when you're thinking about your esports program, think long term. The challenge with having it just student run and not organized by the school is that what happens when that student moves on? What happens if
Yep.
that student goes to a different college, gets recruited by another esports club at a different college that's more serious, more competitive, varsity level, and then there goes your champion.
Yep.
So organizing it by the school can guarantee that consistency. You can't recruit students for something that they don't know will stay or go.
Exactly. Exactly. And from what I hear from students across the country is that's what they all want. If there's one constant that I hear through every esports club that I talk to that's not varsity level, they literally say all we want to do is be varsity. That's it. All we want to do is be recognized by the university. We will do the work. They said we will do the work. Just give me a faculty advisor and make us varsity. If we do that, if we get that, we'll do the work. And so I think if you're a university out there that's on the fence about it, just do it, man. The overhead for running an esports program compared to running even, a baseball or especially a football program, it's night and day. It pales in comparison. Don't make the money argument because you'll just get screamed at by gamers. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Just
And they are
yeah, and they're passionate. When you make the money argument, they'll say, well, a uniform for a football player costs something like $2,000. That's 2 functional gaming PCs. Just go make the investment.
Dang, that's where sort of fighting words, that was a really good point. Really, you think about money allocation. Well, thank you so much, Norris. I think I extracted as much awesome, great nuggets from you as I possibly could in this short time. I look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely.
There you have it, everybody. Norris coming straight to you, telling you just how it is. Esports and traditional sports, the worlds are colliding. Join the esports movement. That's all we got for Esports Center, and I'll see you next time.